was your trip to DC Saturday? Was that a Masonic thing or a work thing?
No, that was a Govy related thing.
Okay.
So,
But
no, it was good because I actually got time to head out to the Air and Space Museum out at Dulles.
Oh, cool.
Which I had never been to before. So got great pictures of the space shuttle Discovery and the Enola Gay, like the entire Enola Gay, and a whole bunch of others. I mean, if you've never been out there yet, it is an amazing museum.
I went to the littler one in DC, and then
the littler one.
Let me go out to Dulles. Well, it's funny. It's like we live near Baltimore, and we went to the Baltimore Aquarium when Isaac was like 3 or 4. And we loved it. The Baltimore Aquarium is gorgeous, and it's like 4 stories.
It is really
dolphins.
Nice.
And I was like, this is awesome. Well, because we had a membership there, we had free admission to the DC version of the whatever the joint thing's called. So we went to the DC Aquarium. It'd be like if you had some goldfish bowls in your basement, you charged me $5 to walk through. It was that tacky, and it was right on the mall. But it's like this is the national aquarium. I mean, literally, I've seen better fish stores. And you want, there's like one room, it's all dark. There's a bunch of same size big aquariums with fish, and you walk around a circle and you've seen all the fish, and there's tanks in the middle too. And you're like, wait, no, seriously? And I think about what's in Baltimore. That's like in
the basement of the Commerce building.
Yes, it is literally in a basement. I'm like, why do you even do this? Why? I mean, someone goes there, it's like, that's what an aquarium is?
So somebody call Elon Musk. That needs to go away.
We're working on it. Well, but when I lived there, I tried my best. I was telling Joe about my plans to go visit every lodge in DC once. I never got around to it. But we tried to go to all the museums and the Smithsonian and the National Art Gallery. All that stuff is great. And then it's like, one of these days we'll go out to Dulles. And then we move back down here, and never happened. So I will have to go up there someday. Check that out. So, Joe, you need to come visit us down at Virginia Research in Richmond sometime.
In Richmond, okay.
Yes. Is that doable for you? We'd love to see you.
Yeah, anything is doable, right?
Right. We're both.
It's a bit of a hike.
Yeah, we're both here in Virginia Beach. We got members out in like the western part of the state who come in. I mean, Richmond's kind of centrally located for Virginia. It's the closest to being central. It's off all the major freeways.
Easiest to get to with 2 or 3 major interstates.
Right. Right. Yeah. But you missed it. It was a good meeting. Wes. It was the first meeting at Mahoa, and everything about it went really well. Here's Cale Joyner.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask how everything went last weekend.
It was okay. So we've been looking to move to the home, and Michael's tuning in here. We've been talking about it for a while, and this is the first time, and everything about it went great. And I got to see one of my old friends, Rodney Van Houten, who's living at the home. And I tell you, young guys about him, you're like, who? Because you stopped going to everything in like the 2000s. He was active in absolutely everything. He brought me almost everything I got initiated into after Blue Lodge. Rodney was part of it, and he and I've known each other forever. And I talk about him, and because he stopped coming, everybody who came in after 2000 was like, who? I'm not that old, but apparently I know people who don't come around no more. So I'm an old guy. But Rodney's living at the home, and it was great. And Brother Finn's here. Good. Brother Finn, who rode up with us, who's new to the lodge. Rodney was talking to me, like talking to Mileman. And he's like, filming. I said, Rodney, I would sit here all day and talk to you, but I'll never get this meeting open. So I'm going to go jump. Wait, we got twins here. Look at this, Joe and Michael. Look at this. I did not get the memo. I mean, look at this. It's great. You guys got it all figured out there. Anyway, so I said, Rodney, I'll never get this meeting open if I just sit here and chat with you. So, okay. But Michael sat down next to him, and Michael's new, so he's asking questions. And Rodney's the perfect guy to just answer every question you have about stuff. And it was great. And I was able to actually get everything ready for the meeting. But we had the district deputy's official visit. We had several deaths that we didn't report. We had an audit we didn't get to do in December. And we had all these things going on. So it was like a 2-hour meeting. but everybody said it went fast. I mean, it didn't seem to drag at all. But we had a lot of stuff, and it just was too much going on at one meeting. And it was our first meeting, so I'd make note of we're here at the home, and here's our plan for how long we're going to keep in and all. It's the next meeting. I'm going to have to keep it shorter just because there was too much stuff going on. But we got through it. But it was great. And the cafeteria was good. We went right down the hall. We wrote a check for everybody. It was $10 per person for lunch. So there's this chair, there's tables at the cafeteria. So you just come in and everyone's in like tables of 6, kind of like Grand Lodge. So, hey, Michael, or Scottish Rite, I guess, when you're seated at the big tables. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. How are you today?
Or Kale, as they call him. Kale Joyner. You were in a hurry typing your name?
Oh, did I misspell it?
It says Kale Joyner. And
Can I change my background? It says you have restricted me from changing my background.
Am I?
Yes.
No, really. I'm going to have to figure that out. And morning, Brother Fenn. I got too many Michaels working for me. I got to figure out a way to call you all. I'm glad you're both here. Give me one second. Go ahead, Wes.
While we're troubleshooting,
Yes.
Can you give me share permissions, por favor?
Yes, I was going to ask you that. Action options. All participants. Okay. That's interesting. Let's see. Row out. No. I'm not sure. You can't change your backgrounds. Let's see. Give me 1 second and I will figure that out. Anybody else change their background? I don't intentionally flag anybody. Anybody else able to change your background? If you had video and background?
You try again then.
Oh, I don't know if somebody else can do it if it's a global setting. Can one of y'all else, Joe or?
What are you trying to?
Change your background. You can go to video and say choose virtual background. Just see if you can set it. It may be I created a new meeting, so it's possible. There. Okay. Well, that's different. Yeah.
Yeah, mine just says you cannot upload images due to the restrictions placed by your admin.
Oh, were you on a government computer?
Hilda Führer.
Let me see something. Okay, I'll look into that.
Okay.
Yep. We know what your room looks like. All right. I don't want to tie up everybody. We're doing that.
Okay.
We're already 10 after, so I'm going to assume this is the audience we're going to get. So
You mean like that?
well, that works too. That's very cool.
That's a video filter.
Right. No, this is the. Yeah, can you do a video filter, Michael? Maybe you just can't upload something. Well, let's figure that out. We'll play with that later.
I'll figure it out. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Anyway, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Virginia Research Lodge's February Unstated meeting. We have here our guest speaker will be the lovely and talented Wes Latchford, who is our senior deacon this year. He ain't been to a meeting yet, but he is our senior deacon here. Not his fault.
You've had one meeting.
Well, he wasn't there in December either. So he wasn't there to get installed. Of course, neither was Michael. I don't know what's going on. I hire these guys and they can't show up for meetings. I don't know.
I was in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania's ways are not your ways, and your ways are not Pennsylvania. Right.
Okay. So I'm going to go for well, maybe, I don't know if Joe has seen these, so I'll go and put this in here. This is, okay, here's the links. We have the link to our Facebook page if you're not already a member, Joe, and I do think the glasses are stylish. Then our website and our new YouTube channel. So all of these, if you're watching us on YouTube sometime in the far future when I've gotten around to uploading this, please like and subscribe. Thank you. But there's our YouTube channel, which you're on if you're watching us on YouTube, and then my email. So, Joe, if you're not already in the email list, I'm not sure I add you. we have a weekly email that we send out, and it has research papers that have been published in the Research Lodge. So I'll get with you about that. Okay, so
I'll just put it in the chat.
Okay, yeah, I sent you a Facebook message, so you can just say hi on Facebook.
Okay.
That's the easy. I like keeping track of people on Facebook because it's just easier for me because they're all in one place. Thanks. All right, so and well, I'll wait for Michael to get back. Brother Finn, how are you doing? I gotta get nicknames here. I realized, Wes, that on the way up to the meeting last week, we have Michael Joyner, Michael Finn, and Michael Johnstone, who are all officers in the Research Lodge. So I got too many Mike, and I'm in the car with two of the Michaels. So it's like I got to find a way to tell you all apart, come up with nicknames or something, so I don't continually, call the wrong guy. But anyway, okay, Michael Joyner is back, or KO as we call him. I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Wes, who will introduce himself. You've got share permissions, and you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Wes Latchford here in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I will not go through Masonic resumes or any of that kind of stuff.
You're a busy guy.
Busy guy, and probably have just been nominated to something else that I'm not aware of. But that's just the nature of the business we're in. Yep. So this morning, I want to go through a presentation that I've got that some of you may have seen. We kind of made our rounds in the state last year with a group of us working to facilitate Masonic education throughout our divisions and districts and lodges. And this particular one is one that I personally believe is becoming of increasing importance, because I'm going to talk this morning about protocol, etiquette, and decorum, and a little of the backgrounds of where these things came from, and more particularly why it's important still to Freemasonry and also still important to society itself. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my desktop. And so, yeah, Masonic protocol, etiquette, and decorum. And this is volume 1. This is kind of an overview of what we mean when we talk about protocol, etiquette, and decorum, and some of its ties into the craft of Freemasonry. Volume 2, then for those Virginia Masons, kind of goes specifically into where we get our Masonic protocol and etiquette and decorum within the Grand Lodge of Virginia. And then volume 3 are some of those specific things that we ought to be doing, many of which we aren't, and then other things that we are doing well and we need to continue with. So this is just volume 1, setting the stage for the other two. Ultimately, we want to make this one of our online correspondence courses, where any brother within the Grand Lodge of Virginia can get into the correspondence course learning management system and be able to take this and work their way through it. So with all of that said, first question I've got, and I can see most everybody here, anybody ever been invited to a White House state dinner? How about a formal dinner at the embassy of a foreign country? Anybody have a grandmother who just set the table like this every time you had dinner? Yeah, I see Joe going, yeah, that was it. Pretty daunting, and it becomes very, very intimidating when you're put in this kind of situation and you don't know what all of that silverware is for and what those little plates are for. The exciting thing is that just about every single one of those glasses in the upper right-hand corner does get filled with some form of alcohol. So that's usually not a bad thing. But again, these are the kind of situations you might find yourself in. So next one. Anybody shown up at a meeting and parked yourself at the table And then someone more important than you shows up, and you've got to become one of the people sitting along the wall.
Several times.
Several times. Yeah. So again, that goes back to kind of a protocol and etiquette, where, yes, the senior executives will sit around the conference table, and the wallflowers can sit and take notes from the side. Or probably in our circumstance, anybody visited another Masonic jurisdiction and felt completely out of place. You're like, well, this looks like Freemasonry, but I got no idea what these guys are doing. And the one that usually comes up, and Michael, you were there, Cale, you were hinting at it, before we got started, was, when you're visiting within Pennsylvania, because it's a very, very rich and uniquely derived set of ritual there. And you learn very quickly which way you're supposed to move within the lodge and what your actual signs are that you need to be doing, which don't necessarily match what we do here in Virginia. But I also caveat this with the idea that, well, yeah, and even within the Grand Lodge of Virginia, there's no guarantee that what you see in one lodge is even going to remotely look like what happens in another. When I was in the East, I used to, lead off with any similarities between what you see here tonight and Virginia ritual is purely coincidental, right? But we're supposed to be mirroring and matching that. So this is what we've got. This is etiquette, protocol, and decorum in its varying shapes and sizes. So what I want to do next is go through and talk about what the definitions of these things are. So civility and courteousness have existed in some way, shape, or form since the beginning of humanity. Actually, former U.S. Chief of Protocol, Mary Mel French, had written a book entitled United States Protocol, The Guide to Official Diplomatic Etiquette. And she said when man first realized he had an ego, protocol found its beginning, because it was, a lot of it was about feeding our own egos and our own sense of worth. But collectively, protocol, etiquette, and decorum refer to rules, conventions, and norms that govern behavior between people and in specific situations. They differ in their terms of influence and the nature of the rules. So the top one is protocol, and there is a difference between protocol, etiquette, and decorum. Sometimes folks use them interchangeably, but there is a very distinct difference. So protocol is a code of conduct or behavior that governs diplomacy and affairs, and particularly between nations or formal organizations, constitutes a set of rules and forms and ceremonies and procedures that are adhered to and agreed to within diplomatic and government realms, right? So it's the way that organizations and nations interact with each other, that formal set of rules. Etiquette, on the other hand, is the customary code of social behavior that comes from the application of that protocol. And so it's the set of norms and ethics that we use within professional bodies, and you see it a lot, particularly within the medical profession, within the legal profession, right? There's a set of etiquette that goes with being in court, that goes with being in an operating room. Everybody has their place, and the etiquette goes to making that work smoothly. And then decorum really is just that idea of the dignity and the sense of what is becoming and appropriate for a person of good breeding. But with all that said, what really is the difference? So let's dig a little deeper into each one of these: protocol, etiquette, and decorum. So protocol comes from the Greek, go figure, and it's a combination of two terms. It's the term protos, which means first, and cola, which means glue. So protocol really is the first glue. And the word protocolon referred to the first sheet of paper that was put on a papyrus roll, and what it had on it was the date that scroll was made, and then also what it contained. So what we really find then is protocol, that first glue, was considered the glue that held everything together and gave you a hint of what was inside. So modern protocol evolved out of not just the use of the term, but through the Greek city-states. We're trade independence, and the complexity of that among the Greek city-states increased and established a set of rules of interaction. So unlike our modern protocol, and its main characteristics, Greek diplomacy and protocol was all about public negotiation. So they would negotiate trade treaties, they would negotiate peace treaties, they would negotiate agreements between different organizations and even different businesses by exchanging public oaths. So this was all done in public. This was all done within the public square. And they did this by use of what were called proxinos, or heralds. The proxinos was similar to what we would consider a modern day consul or ambassador. So, the consul's office, or the ambassador to France, to Sweden, whoever. But heralds actually needed great memory and a very strong voice, because they were sent as the specific representatives to relay messages from their leaders to the other city-states. And again, this was all done in the public square. So some of the finest orators and philosophers of the day, like Plato and Aristotle, were the ones best suited to conducting those tasks as a herald, as they were often very skilled masters in the trivium. And we find the trivium within Freemasonry when we're talking in the fellowcrafts degree, because trivium is grammar, rhetoric, and logic, which again come to us as part of the seven liberal arts and sciences, and are the things that we as Freemasons are tasked to become masters of. So although typically associated with diplomatic relations and nations, protocol is not always political. Again, it's that basic courtesies and rules that influence how people get along. The example of this that I like to use in Freemasonry to kind of differentiate that line between protocol, etiquette, and decorum is we had an instance in one of my lodges where we had a gentleman petition to receive the degrees in Freemasonry. And the two vouchers, the signers on his petition, were members of the Grand Lodge of Iceland. So this is where the protocol comes into play, right? Because the secretary of my lodge didn't call the secretary of the lodges in Iceland and start asking questions about whether they were members in good standing and so on and so forth. The protocol is that question gets referred to our grand jurisdiction, who then goes across and talks to the Grand Lodge of Iceland, who then confirms with the individual lodge, and then it goes back up across and back down again. And so that's one example of the protocol that we see within Freemasonry. It's a very, very distinct way of doing business and communicating with different entities. And you can kind of think of grand jurisdictions as their, kind of their own little Greek city-state, where they can influence where they are, but anything outside of it needs to be negotiated and conducted with proper set of rules and conduct. Any question on protocol, and anybody got anything they can think of that also kind of fits into the idea of protocol when it comes to Freemasonry?
The district deputy's official visit, or Grand Master's official visit, it's carefully planned out. You have to wear gloves. We're wearing tuxedos. There's a specific ritual to receiving them and all like that.
Yeah, there's a protocol that goes with it, and he just doesn't show up, right? He has to announce and inform and let the worshipful master know when he's making his official visit. He can come visit anytime he wants, but that official visit, right, is very, very scripted out, and there's a means of doing that. The other thing that leads us into the next topic, and Chris, you mentioned, the wearing of the gloves, and there's even specific lighting that is required, particularly if it happens to be the Grand Master visiting. And that gets us into the next section, which is on etiquette. And etiquette is a term that comes from the French, and it's derived from a customary code of polite behavior or contemporary conventions, forms, manners, rules, and ceremonies that govern social behavior. So according to several different books and several different researchers, etiquette was actually introduced during the reign of King Louis XIV and refers to the conduct and proper behavior that was expected within his garden palace, better known as Versailles, and allegedly started with the royal gardener politely asking the king to help him keep the grounds clean and keep all of the botanicals from being destroyed, because as they would have these parties, people would walk through the flower beds or pick the flowers or just leave their trash wherever they wanted. And so what the king told him was, well, put out little signs. And so etiquette came to be known colloquially as little signs. And so literally he put out little signs that would say, keep off the grass, keep out of the flower beds, which established that basic etiquette that was expected. And over time, they didn't need the little signs because everyone began to realize, oh, there's a way I'm supposed to behave when I'm at the king's summer palace, and I better start doing that.
I can ask a question, Wes?
Yeah.
Because I've run into this with speaking to friends who's like, why do I need to learn proper English? Or talking to my son, why do I need to learn table manners? What's the best response to someone who doesn't get that, etiquette serves a purpose? It's just those are the rules we follow. What's a good way to boil that down for somebody, say someone who came to the king's affair and wasn't used to being in the royal court? And it's like, why do I got to follow these rules? What's the best way to politely tell them this is etiquette? This is what we do.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'll get to a little bit of that a couple slides from now. But I think part of it, and this is part of what I think we've lost, is this understanding that not only is it, quote unquote, proper manners, but it also goes to the idea of treating others in the way that you want to be treated. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't even treat themselves properly, and so that's lost a bit of the impetus. But honestly, when it comes to protocol, etiquette, and decorum, it's all about appreciating and understanding the sensitivities of the person you're interacting with, not so much about you. I'm going to go back to the quote from the U.S. protocol chief, where it was initially all about our own egos, but what it really is being gentlemanly or ladylike and understanding the sensitivities of others and working really hard not to offend. And unfortunately, and I'll talk about this a little bit as we go on as well, we've kind of become where if I'm not offending somebody, I'm not doing my job right. I'm not living right. And so for me, and I think through the entire group of folks who make up etiquette consultants around the world, they would say, it's not about you. It's not about why you need to. It's why it actually takes place. And we forget about it. And one of the examples that I use for the etiquette part that seems to be the bane of a lot of lodges' existence is introductions. Right. You'll hear the question, well, why do we have to do the introductions? And, I have gotten to where, I will say I stand once, because if not, it's like being in church, because I stand up and introduce one, stand up and introduce. But what it was and what it goes back to is that idea of we are a fraternity on the level. And so it doesn't matter whether you were the Baron von Steuben or the Marquis de Lafayette, or whether you just came in from plowing your field, you can learn how to better yourself. And one of those things that became part of how we do business in the lodge is that idea of introductions. Because if you're not used to an environment like a garden party where introductions are expected, or put it in a modern context, where you just happen to be at a party somewhere, and you may know folks, and this happens all the times, but your spouse does not. The proper etiquette is to conduct introductions, and there's a way to do that, and we learn that in the lodge, by going through and introducing everyone and having them introduce themselves. And it's part of a public speaking environment too, where you become comfortable with that, so that when you are in a situation where you have to do it, it's not new to you, right? And that's part of what the lodge setting is supposed to be too, is a comfortable, safe place where we can learn this from each other. And I think we tend to forget that too. But again, to take and say, well, why should I do this? It's like, well, the Central Pennsylvania Appalachian hillbilly in me just says, well, you want to be a hick all your life. Yeah, Mike.
You did here. Okay. Just a quick thing on that, because I know this comes up, a lot of times when we're at a formal thing, like you said, a Grand Master's visit or, district deputy. As you were saying earlier, we have so many titles. I believe am I correct, in Virginia states that you go by the highest title you currently hold? Is that correct?
That's correct, and that actually gives me something that is kind of a personal pet peeve too, that I don't know enough brothers are aware of, and I also think it becomes a little bit of an ego thing too, is that the highest title we have held has has a series of letters that will go after our name. Mm-hmm. Right. So PM, past master, PDDGM, past district deputy grand master, PGM, past grand master. The titles of those currently filling those positions, most worshipful, right worshipful, are the titles of those currently holding the position. It is an element of respect. So, Michael, I know you are a past master. Right? So I can refer to you as worshipful, worshipful Michael. But you don't refer to yourself that way. And I see so many brothers who continue to use the worshipful title in their signature block, or when they're introducing themselves. It's like, no, the worshipful is the dude sitting in the chair. Your title, as bequeathed by the Grand Lodge of Virginia, is past master, past district deputy grand master. So once you finish in that position, you can be given the honorific by someone else, but you don't put it on yourself. And again, I see that all the time, and that's part of that etiquette thing that we've forgotten. And I mean, and again, I can show you chapter and verse, my thought of a digest where it specifically says that, but again, that kind of goes to the ego, and to me, I think it's disrespectful, for the guy in the chair who is the worshipful master. That it's like, no, I'm just brother now. I did my time. And so, dude, you are the worshipful master. I'm just a past master who, to the decorum side of things, will sit and correct you, every time that you're that you're violating the protocol or etiquette or the decorum. So, in the decorum part of it, again, it's actually a Latin term that means right and proper. And it goes to the principle of classical rhetoric, poetry, or theatrical theory, and really is how we conduct ourselves. So we have protocol and etiquette that's expected within the lodge, and then there's a certain level of decorum that is expected when you're there. It's that set of standards of your own personal behavior. So, protocol is the behavior of the organization, the etiquette is the behavior of the group, and then decorum is behavior of the actual individual. And I like this cartoon titled Yeah.
I'm sorry. Looking for a pause. Yeah, to address Mike's question, Michael's question, because this is a valid thing. Generally speaking, if you get introduced in a lodge, you should only get introduced once. If you're currently a Grand Lodge committeeman, you only get introduced at that level. You're a past master, but you don't say it. There are a couple exceptions, or something, like our meeting last Friday or last Saturday. If you're a past master of Virginia Research Lodge, that lodge, I introduced you. That's separate and apart from anything else. So that's always going to be, if you're in your lodge and they introduce past masters, you get introduced once. If you are head of an independent body, that is like high priest or sovereign master or what have you. You get introduced separate and apart from everything else. Besides those two, you should only get introduced once, right? So if you're just a past master, you stand up under past masters. But if you're a past master of our lodge, you would only stand up at that point. But like if you're a Grand Lodge committeeman or a Grand Officer, you're only going to stand up then. You won't stand up as past masters, and you won't stand up because you say who do not hold office or title in Grand Lodge. You would stand up if you're head of an independent body and the Grand Marshal, for example. So basically, there's 3 times you could possibly stand up the way introductions are done. But that's kind of the exception, and most of us would only get introduced one time. That makes sense? And we should stick to that. We try to teach people that they should only really stand. If you're a past master, but you're also the Grand Marshal, you don't stand up under past masters, deputy Grand Masters, because we say, who do not hold office or title in Grand Lodge. I think for the most part, people have figured that out by now. So.
Yeah, but it's funny, and I'll finish on the decorum part of it, because I think this is part of it too. Is I stand once. When we get to committeemen, because that usually, and there's no necessarily set order too, right? Once you've opened a lodge, the ritual is done. The rest of it is the agenda of the master. And I've seen lodges that do introductions at the very beginning, some that do it towards the end. And there's some where the worshipful master literally introduces everybody, and others where it's, and introduce yourself at your seat. But the other thing too, that is part of that, etiquette part of it, is realistically the individual also gets to have a say in how they wish to be introduced, because again, there's this ongoing back and forth of, if you have a very, very proactive and involved district deputy who attends every lodge's stated communication in his district to formally receive him and bring him to the east and everything else, that's what the etiquette says. However, the district deputy also gets a vote in that matter too, where he can go, you know what, I'm okay if you just introduce me at my seat, and I can make the comments from there. So it's kind of a two-way street, and that's part of the decorum, is understanding that. And the other thing is not freaking out when it doesn't happen. Like I've told folks in my lodge, I only stand once, and yet every single time where they're introducing asking for past masters to introduce themselves, I get eyeballs looking at me. I'm like, I stand once, because it's not about me. And I like this graphic, which is actually an early 19th century drawing. But you can tell that all of the suitors of the widow in this particular cartoon have completely lost their decorum, right? Because women don't get up and ring the servant's bell. That is a gentleman's job. And so they have failed by her doing what we think, right? Violating the etiquette and the decorum by choosing to do it herself, right? So the district deputy choosing not to be received in these, just introduce me at my seat. But the way I put this into a Masonic context as well is lady in the yellow dress ringing the bell is the worshipful master sitting in the east presiding over, you name it. It could be degree work, it could be a regular state of communication, and trips and stumbles over a couple words, and all of the suitors are the past masters. Absolutely losing their stuff because you said one thing, it was supposed to be another, right? And we see that all the time, and that's the decorum part of it, right? It's just behave yourself, and things happen, and just roll with it, right? Don't There's no reason to, like the one guy on the side, choke on your biscuit because you failed, and she's going and doing something that ought not to happen. For Freemasonry, where this really kind of rolled in, was in that age of enlightenment, where protocol, etiquette, and decorum, again, to that point, it had been much like the garden party, right? It had been landed gentry. It had been part of the royal palaces, so those who were of high breeding and esteem. But as the Enlightenment came along, we started to see what we have in Freemasonry with that idea of the equality of all men, and to where protocol, etiquette, and decorum started to be consciously adopted in order just to better oneself, right? And the two best examples we have, both within American history, but within American Freemasonry, are Benjamin Franklin and George Washington, who both wrote their own rules of civility or codes of conduct that they tried to live by, and establishing and propagating certain rules of etiquette for themselves, and then therefore within American society. So just a little story on Ben Franklin's Book of Virtues. He was actually 20 years old when he set a lofty goal of attaining moral perfection. So to keep track of his adherence to these virtues that he laid out, that you'll find in his Book of Virtues, he had 13 charts, which consisted of a column for each day of the week, and then 13 rows marked with the first letter of each of his virtues. And these were the 13 virtues: temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, humility, and chastity. And at the end of each day, he literally would go through his little book and he would grade himself on how well he did, in trying to achieve each one of those moral principles in his conduct over the course of the day. And he did that his entire life. I think the one he probably scored worst in is the chastity one, because if you know anything about Brother Ben, he was quite the ladies' man. But again, age 20, he's thinking about these things, how to better myself and how to better represent myself within the society of the day. Not to do him one better, but at age 16, George Washington copied out 110 rules of civility and decent behavior in company and conversation. And so it has come to be known as Washington's book, but honestly, historians have pretty much traced back that most of the rules go back to a French etiquette manual that was compiled by Jesuits in 1595, and were presumably copied as an exercise in penmanship assigned by Brother Washington's schoolmaster. So he was basically working on his handwriting, but at the same time learning some of these principles that he then compiled together and worked to live by himself. So whether it was a homework assignment or not, it had a great influence on his entire life, as did the Book of Virtues on Brother Franklin. And they are the ones that we look up to, as those examples of civility and moral fortitude and all of the things that we expect from a Freemason, and also expect other people to then translate back to us, right? The way we treat people in the way we want to be treated, and this was their way of ascending from an agrarian culture into more of a sophisticated, and for Washington's perspective, a leadership position of how you dress, how you're expected to walk, how to eat, and how you should talk to and communicate with others. And again, it just astounds me that at such early ages, both of these gentlemen saw the benefits of bettering themselves, and again, not continuing to choose to be a colonial hick within the House of Burgesses in Williamsburg. But this is the point, besides just the history and the background of what protocol, etiquette, and decorum is, and how it's been inculcated into Freemasonry, but where we are today and why this is an important conversation. And so the book on the left is a 2019 report entitled Civility in America, and it was a nationwide survey done by Weber Shandwick and a marketing firm, Powell Tate. And what they discovered in their research was that 70% of Americans believe incivility has reached crisis proportions. The American Bar Association, a little later in 2023, did their own survey and found that 85% believe that civility was worse today as compared to 10 years ago. And then a book I highly recommend by Dr. Pierre Forney, Choosing Civility, summarized things like this. And again, it goes to that question of, well, why should I? And it says, our manners inevitably suffer when we are poorly trained in self-restraint. We're used to seeing others as a means to the satisfaction of our own desires rather than ends in and of themselves. We're overly concerned about financial gain and professional achievement, and we are constantly besieged by stress and fatigue, and we're surrounded by strangers who will remain strangers. And the thing that stuns me about those 5 things that he observed is that was written in 2002. We haven't gotten much further in addressing the suffering we have when it comes to our civility and our manners and our protocol, etiquette, and decorum. And he finishes that with, when some or all of these factors are at work, it becomes difficult to be considerate. And consideration is the ethical requirement of manners that are really good. And that's why it still matters, both in society and the lodge. And there's a quote from Cicero, which was written around 80 BC, where he says, if we're forced at every hour to watch and listen to horrible events, this constant stream of ghastly impressions will deprive even the most delicate among us all respect for humanity. And this is usually the point when I'm doing this in person. I hold up, an electronic device and say, per ref A, see exhibit B. We are besieged by incivility electronically, when we go out into public, when we're even interacting with our families. And unfortunately, it's crept into our lodges and how we interact with each other. And this lack of civility, when it permeates all facets of our lives and are at every levels, makes it such that we are our own worst enemies. According to a March 2023 survey by Mequilibrium, 26% of people have quit a job because they believe it to be an uncivil workplace. So the question I have is, if people are willing to leave their job, how many more are willing to leave a lodge? Because they're finding it to be an incivil place, not a safe place where everyone meets on the level, but a whole bunch of egos banging heads with each other. There was a further study done of Fortune 1000 firms, and they discovered that 13% of supervisors say they are spending too much of their time dealing with human interactions and people being incivil with each other. And so the question with that is, how would you rather spend your time? Refereeing incivility in their lodge, or acting in your community and welcoming new brothers and actually making a difference? The other thing with incivility creeping into our lodges is how many are going to walk out for the last time, and how many potential members do we lose because they're seeing this. And a lot of times brothers don't realize they're doing it because it has become such a huge part of our own American society. That same report by Hadwick and Tate also showed that 62% of Americans said that if an organization existed to make it easier to port civility and etiquette and protocol and demonstrated proper decorum, they would get involved and be likely to participate. Who were the 62%? Gen Zs and millennials, and parents of children 18 years of age or under. And those are the groups that we continually say, we need to attract. Well, they're looking for what we have. They're looking for what Freemasonry can offer. But a lot of times when they interact with us, they're not seeing it. And so a lodge and its brethren who understand the importance of protocol, etiquette, and decorum plays a critical role in fostering civility in our gentle craft and provides a bulwark against reduced enthusiasm, declining attendance, dwindling active participation in our projects and activities, reduced public awareness, and just a flat out poor membership experience within the fraternity. Again, we have the tools. We need to start utilizing the tools in order to change this perception that we live in this huge uncivil society. And so with that, knowing that there's maybe a few minutes left, that's just the first baseline of why protocol, etiquette, and decorum are important, not only in Freemasonry, but also with the rest of the world. And with that, I will leave you to ponder.
Thank you, Brother Wes. That was very good. Michael, Johnny, have a question?
Yeah, one thing that just an observation I've been told, for example, in other countries, as we were pointing out earlier, once you are no longer in an officer's chair, you're simply brother. You cannot be called worshipful, right worshipful, and like that. Once you have stepped down from that position. So, I believe that this is particularly true in the British lodges, that past masters cannot use worshipful. They are simply brothers from then on in the lodge. I think that echoes something that you said earlier.
Yeah, and there's several jurisdictions that are that way, and I actually think there's probably some U.S. jurisdictions that have that as well. And again, and the other thing that's important to understand is a lot of this isn't necessarily written down, right? So there are the very specific, particularly the protocol things, right? So how an individual lodge interacts with another lodge in another jurisdiction, right? That's pretty well defined within the Methodical Digest and various other places. But a lot of this etiquette and decorum are the things that we pass down by the way we act, right? It's just the way it is. One of the stories that I think we always hear, and in particular related with what you call the golden age of Freemasonry, was just you knew a Freemason just because they acted differently, right? There was just something about them where they just were a little more polite, a little carried themselves just a little better, and really were interested in you, not themselves. And I would submit that I think we may have lost a little of that, and you won't find that written anywhere. I mean, we do have a mentor's manual that addresses a good portion of this, but it's taking that from out within the lodge and taking it outside the lodge, right? I mean, I'm non-attribution, but I have seen brothers who act differently. They can be very cordial and be great brothers in the lodge, but then you see them interacting out in public outside of a Masonic environment, and I'm just like, who the heck are you? Where take right. What have you forgotten from when we were together in the lodge to how you're talking to this other person who deserves just as much respect, right? So
about the worshipful thing, I think to sum it up, it's like if I'm introducing you in my lodge, it's, worshipful Michael Joyner, past master of such and such lodge. So I'm addressing you. I'm going to use your title. But if I walked up to you and say, hey, Brother Michael, you are not to say it's worshipful. That's the whole point. We only should really use those titles when we're introducing you, when we're doing introductions, right? Or I call on you to speak, worship brother, or just, I can just say, Brother Joyner, can we have a point report on this committee, whatever. But the whole point of those titles are for introductions. And if I'm emailing you, I'm going to say, right, worshipful so-and-so usually. But once we go back and forth, I may not even have a salutation, or just like you and I are having a conversation in email. I'm going to say, I'll try to say, if I don't know you real well, worshipful Joyner, blah, blah, blah. Or I'll say, brother, blah, blah, blah. But, after we're going on a while, you can't even drop that. But the whole point is, it's like your initial introduction. If I'm emailing a Grand Master out of the blue about something, I'm going to say, most worshipful Galladay to start the email. It's civility. I mean, like everything Wes is talking about. It's very straightforward, but I know several people. Bill Holiday was famous for this, who was from Norview Lodge, and he was one of the recent grandmasters from our area. I'll say that. There have been some since then, but he's one of the more memorable ones that everybody liked and loved, Bill Holiday. But he would say, it's just brother. You go up and talk to him. If you said most worshipful, just talking to him outside the lodge, it's just brother. He would stress, it's just brother. And any brother who would correct you and say it's worshipful, if I'm just talking to you, they've got it wrong. It's a formal introduction. If I'm just talking to you, I say, hey, brother, correcting someone on it is that's where the civility kicks in. I think it's not our place to correct you if you get it wrong. That's more the genteel nature is let it go.
And what you're describing is, and again, it's an honorific at that point, right? I mean, every single one of us sitting here, has some initials, some actual title after our name, past master, past district deputy grand master. When somebody else is
Brother Fan is a token member.
Soon, eventually to be, right?
Give him a couple of years, he'll be a past master.
He'll get talked
whether he wants it or not,
as we all do. But when someone else is using it on your behalf, then it's an honorific, right? Again, we do the same things with, when are you no longer the president of the United States, right? Because you'll still, refer to any of the past presidents as Mr. President, right? Because but it's an honorific at that point. It's not an actual, positional title. And there was something else that had made me think of as well, but it's probably moot at this point. But again, the biggest thing is just for heaven's sakes, just act civilly. I mean, we actually, in a lodge, and you don't see it very often, but actually saw the worshipful master wrap down another brother. And we talk about it, during the installation and, and in the, past master's degree, about, that gavel is your tool to maintain, order and everything else. And tell me anybody an instance where recently you have seen the gavel used in that manner. But again, it was getting out of control, and the particular individual was not being terribly civil. And so the fortunate thing is once that great big gavel came down and he actually broke the little thing that goes underneath it to keep it from damaging the podium. I mean, he shattered that thing because again, it was getting rough.
Huh. I'll give you an example of what you were just saying, if I may. There's a famous story about Harry Truman used to like to visit Alexandria, Washington. And once someone came up to him and said, Mr. President, may I ask you a question? He turned to him and said, once I cross that door, I'm Brother Truman like everybody else here.
Yeah, I love that story too.
I visited another jurisdiction, as you know, in Virginia, we always we have the inside-outside rule on our aprons.
Yeah.
But when I was in another jurisdiction, I was corrected, and somebody actually turned to me and said, in our jurisdiction, we wear our aprons outside. Would you mind wearing your apron outside? And I felt that was with decorum or thing here with, because it strikes me as that I think when you visit another district, you're respected to do what you do in your jurisdiction, not to conform to the other. Where lies that?
And again, that goes to the understanding and to the civility part of it, and realizing again there are differences. I had the same similar yet not similar apparently experience when I was a speaker up in a lodge in Pennsylvania. Again, I was wholly unaware of all of the different things that took place within their lodge room, but to the point, the worshipful master, specifically said, "You do what you do, because we're going to learn as much from you as you are from us," which was great, because then I didn't feel as bad when I'd go and they do things very, very differently. Not wrong, just differently. And some of it I actually thought was really cool. And when we're in a different setting, we can sit and talk about what some of those things were. But there was the cordiality of saying, you do what you do because that's, the Masonry where you're from, not asking you to become a Pennsylvania Mason. And again, then we had great conversations. So it was like, oh, wait, we do this way. And I was like, oh, okay. Have had to happen in North Carolina too, where they do particularly some degree work a little differently. And for those who have not had the experience, if you get the opportunity, go visit a stated meeting or the degree work of a Prince Hall affiliated lodge. And again, there is cordiality, and there is protocol, etiquette, and decorum all wrapped up in with that. But again, I wouldn't expect them to come into my lodge and
I think
stand the opportunity to be embarrassed, right? And that's the one thing we don't want to embarrass anyone. And that's, I think, where a lot of people, again, for whatever reason, get off the track, is because they're more concerned about the protocol or the etiquette and less about the person. And it's like, no, that's supposed to be contributing to making them comfortable, not a way to take and make them uncomfortable, and probably in the grand scheme of things never come back to my lodge.
you mentioned, Wes, how a lot of things aren't written down; they're sort of understood. I mean, I've attended lodges in Maryland, and my rule of thumb, which I think works, that I would tell any other brothers going out to visit, is okay. I only visited a few times. Unfortunately, I didn't get to visit a lot of lodges in Maryland. But when I visited, and they do the signs and such a little differently when they open and close. I wore my apron on the inside, and I did everything I would do in a Virginia lodge, even though I knew other people were moving, like, well, they're going to catch up with me, or I'm going to catch up with them when we're moving our hands around. That's as far as I'll go. But the point was, I'm visiting you. And the ritual was quite different. I talked about it. It's like, hopefully I'm here often enough. And once I feel like I'm a regular attendee and not just a once or twice visitor, I'll try and follow what you do so I blend in. But if it's my first time visiting, yeah, I should do what Virginia taught me. And that's what I expect brothers to do when they visit us here. We've had Pennsylvania Masons, I have English Masons, North Carolina Masons all come visit a Virginia lodge, and they do their thing, and we're done, and we kind of glance over, and he's still got 3 more steps. So it's like, okay, we'll wait on him. But the point is, you do what's yours, like you said, at least on your first visit. But if I'm living in Maryland, and I plan to live in Maryland for a time, after I'd say a year or so of regularly attending, I would start doing things. I'd start learning their ritual and start doing it exactly the way they do to fit in, because I'm a regular. I'm not just the occasional visitor. And that's a simple rule. And I think it's kind of instinctive, but there's no harm either way. It just sort of don't, like you're saying, don't make someone uncomfortable. Don't make them feel out of place. We're supposed to be welcoming and brotherly. So if you obsess about the rules, you're working exactly contrary to the whole spirit of the rule, which is we want to make every brother feel comfortable and in a safe environment. If you keep that in the back of your mind, it's like, yeah, I'm going to let it go. Or I might say, funny thing, we wear our aprons on the outside, but you, by all means, do what you do. I've seen it there both ways. So,
Yeah, and the master that I mentioned in Pennsylvania, I think part of it is his own experience because he moved to Pennsylvania from New York,
ah,
and so had to learn
where,
Pennsylvania ritual, and again, kind of get rid of it. And I mean, we had a master, in my lodge that was from Louisiana,
mm,
and which is the Louisiana ritual would sneak in every once in a while. Um, not looking to make them uncomfortable, but yeah, so that's just be nicer to. Why can't we all just get along?
by the way, go
So I'd
ahead,
like to
Joe.
offer a little different view to
Please.
that. One thing, Brother Wes, thanks for putting this on. This has been a very interesting conversation. I got just all kinds of thoughts. The first one I'd like to present is, how much harmonization this has with those of us in the military profession, and the courtesies that are, the honors and courtesies, and that's a term, that we do there. It has a lot to do with protocol, etiquette, and decorum. The titles, very interesting about the titles. And probably more for what we call our flag and general officers, so admirals and generals. What do you call them when you see them? Well, if you're, and it's more like, in our case, protocol, because there are books written about what do you call somebody and when do you call them, and when you call them rear admiral instead of just admiral, and it's formal to the informal, and rarely do you ever get to be so informal that you call them something different, unless they tell you. So you ask them, what's the admiral's first name? Well, it's Admiral. Um, and Okay, so how about when they're retired and they're no longer on active duty? So the worshipful master who is no longer sitting in the East. Typically, when speaking to that individual, it's similar to what we do in Lodge today. He's sitting with me in the North as we're watching the things get ready to go on. I'll look at him and say, "Hey, worshipful Sid, how are you tonight?" And is that too formal? He's no longer sitting in the East, but it's simply a recognition, an acknowledgement that that person had that position and has earned that thing. Now, it's well within their bounds to come back and say, nope, just call me brother. And if they do, okay, I'll do that. But the military is pretty much the same way. And until you're told otherwise, we typically will go to the more formal. Hey, Admiral, how you doing today? And it's, hey, we're out now. We're both retirees. We're peers to that point. Okay, well, perhaps, and that works. I wouldn't say it's bad for anybody to go to the more formal, because it's easier, and I think better civilly, to be more formal and be asked to back down than it is to assume familiarity.
Hey, Bob.
And those who speak French will tell you the same thing. If you ever learn how to speak French, and it's always, you start with a more formal vous, you, before you go to the informal toi when you're talking to you, or if you don't know the person, you always want to start a little bit more formally until you become familiar and then can back down. In the military, again, in the use of the terms, you said, a former worshipful, a former master should not call themselves that. Well, in the military, it's kind of the same way. I mean, if you're in an introduction environment, that's a little bit different. But one thing that's rather interesting is how many of them, and I'm looking for an example, it's the business card. when you get the business card from a retired flag or general officer, and they find that they have to put it on their business card what their prior rank was. Is that in good etiquette and good form? Some would tell you no, it's more vain than it is being informative, because if they're in a commercial enterprise, or if it's just their own personal card, by using that, it's almost to your example, I think, where you said, where the worshipful introduces himself as worshipful to somebody when he's not sitting in a chair. So I think there's a lot of parallels there. So that's the first thing. I've probably overstated the obvious here. Brother Chris, to your discussion about making people not feel comfortable. Now, here's the alternate view I'm going to give you. And it's like when we travel overseas, or we know we're going to travel to somewhere where it's a different culture and a different bunch of folks. What do you do before you go? You got Rick Steves or Fodor or somebody, and you're looking through the books and you're trying to understand what you're getting ready to walk into, so that you can either, for safety reasons, you dress in such a way that you don't draw attention to yourself. Because if you're an American in certain places, even in the relative safety of Europe, if you stand out because you got that T-shirt on with whatever saying or whatever, it could be detrimental to your health and safety, not just your ego or your vanity. So I always find knowing that, and it's not wrong, or I'm not saying the way you were doing it is wrong. I'm simply saying it's just a different view, is that before I go to another lodge in another state, because I know almost invariably, having been raised in Pennsylvania, but then now affiliated in Virginia and grew up in North Carolina and been in my dad's lodge, things are all different. Because I know they're going to be different. One of the first things I do is when I call the secretary and say, hey, I'd like to come visit. Is there anything I need to know by being a Virginia Mason that I should be aware of for that particular lodge? Or when I'm being greeted and tested, and perhaps if they're having a meal before, I'll want to know. So what can you tell me so that, one, I'm not totally lost, and two, I don't embarrass myself before walking into your lodge, because again, as the visitor, I'm the one encroaching upon your kind offices, although you're sitting there saying, well, I don't want to make you feel bad and feel embarrassed because you are our guest and we want to treat you like a guest. The cool thing is, if both people are saying the same things to each other, you're really coming to that very civil point where you're trying to take care of each other and not one being overly demanding of the other. And that's probably enough to say about that.
I think, Joe, I get your point. I think there is a marked difference between when I travel in a foreign country, I should do myself to blend in just as a safety concern. That's a whole different thing from going to a lodge where you assume it's a safe environment. I'll tell a quick story. I was in Italy and I had a wonderful experience. I got to attend a military lodge, Harry S. Truman Lodge, which was everyone there was a master chief except me. I was a contractor. But we had the master chief of AFN for Europe, the master chief of the NATO base, the master chief of the base was there. All these, and I'm just a little old contractor, but everybody there was from different Grand Lodges and whatever. Then one of our guys knew a guy who was a member of the Grand Orient of Italy, which we were under, took us to an Italian lodge. And I walk in with my blazer and I got my things, my lapel pins, and I'm wearing my Blue Lodge ring. And this Italian comes up and says, and I'm like, what? And the guy says, hey, you went out in public like that? They do not, in Italy, they do not wear Masonic pins or rings or put decals on their car. They totally keep that on the down low because of the political shenanigans of a few years earlier involving a certain lodge, Propaganda Due and all that. I didn't write a paper about P2 just because it was so fascinating how wrong they went. Short answer, Joe Blow was the master of Propaganda Due, which was under the Grand Orient of Italy. And he said, hey, I'm Grand Master for life, and that's just how it is. And the Grand Orient, which is the Grand Lodge, there's a Northern Grand Lodge and there's a Southern Grand Orient, and they don't get along. The Grand Master said, you don't get to be Master for life. And the Master of the Lodge said, well, piss on you. We are the Grand Lodge of Propaganda Due. So they got into all kinds of issues involving banks and involving the police and corruption, all kinds. Every conspiracy theory about Masons kind of lived itself out in Italy. So as a result, the lodges kept it all in the down low because they don't want to be harassed by the state for being a Mason. And you went to this office building that was like, the first floor was like a mall. You know, it's like all these little shops and everything. And you take the elevators up and there's law offices and real estate, you know, the office buildings up and down. You go up to the fourth floor, you go to a door without any markings and you go in and there's the lodge, and the whole fourth floor is all the lodge. Nothing on the street, nothing anyone anywhere could tell that a Masonic lodge met there. But if you knew, you could go and you'd be let in. So it was a totally different experience for me. But that was simply, again, safety on their part. They didn't want the police hassling them. They didn't call attention to themselves because the government and the public had a negative impression of Masonry because of what a lodge had actually done, not conspiracy stuff. It really happened. The public had a valid reason to be concerned that the police chief was corrupt and a member of the lodge, and people were getting dismissed from trials because they were Masons, and all the bad things that they say we do, they're actually doing. So, anyhow.
I would say something like that because I've heard that in England, for example, and I know for Germany too, lodges are clearly marked. You can see, from the outside that that's a lodge. But I do know, like, so I was just sitting here as we were talking about this, pondering. We got so used in America, particularly in Virginia. In the summer, we wear lodge polos. And I started thinking, well, what country could I wear a lodge polo in if I was visiting? And what country would I not wear a lodge polo in? Right. For example. Because I think you're right. Even the British, who don't mind marking, well, this is a lodge. You can see the square and compass. If you're going through a town, you would see, oh, there's their lodge. But I don't know that. I'm not sure if they would be happy with me wearing a lodge polo there.
Right. And you definitely were one of the few countries where people put Masonic emblems on their cars. We're kind of rare. I want to say something unrelated to anything we've been talking about. This is unique in the 80-some unstated meetings. All 5 people in this Zoom are Virginia Masons. I know that Virginia Research Lodge sponsors these events, but most of the time, I got brothers from England and Scotland and whatever here and other states. All 5 of us are Virginia Masons, and 4 out of the 5 are members and officers in Virginia Research Lodge. That's never happened.
So what you're saying is we are just an echo chamber of excellence for this afternoon.
So we need to get Joe to affiliate, and I'll put him in line, and that way all 5 of us will have been technically. I think this never happens. Usually I'm lucky, honestly, to have 1 or 2 of you with me, and I wanted to lean on my officers and say, please make an effort to attend more of these, because usually I'm the only one. And that happens. But I love the fact that I got a brother from Australia who at 1 a.m. will tune into these Unstateds. And I got regular guys. My usual co-host isn't here, but he's kind of cut off a little bit. But he was here at every meeting for like the last 30 or 40 or more. So I have regular attendees from Europe who are here and brothers from across the states who come in regularly. It's just the first time we happen to have all Virginia Masons in here. But mine is a much more international flavor to these Zoom meetings normally. So we're the exception today. I don't know why. Just
that is sad today that we don't have someone to give us, the Australian or the British perspective.
Exactly, and that's what I love about it. And that's why I try to ask questions. Like if we're killing time, sometimes if I have a good crowd, I'll like ask a question of the group just to stimulate discussion. One time it was like, how many, if you given the choice, would you rather be in a lodge of 300 members where only 20 or 30 ever showed up, or 30 members where everyone showed up all the time? And it was kind of back and forth about that. It's like, and it was just sort of what people thought. And we had all kinds of, I love getting people's reactions like on questions like that, and especially guys from other jurisdictions, other countries, and how they do things. It's fascinating as Masons to say, this is what we do. Like we're talking about Maryland and Pennsylvania and all that. Well, this is just what we do. It's normal to all of us what Virginia does. That's Masonry. And if you never visit a lodge outside of Virginia, or much less your own district sometimes, you think that's all Masonry is.
Blasphemer.
And you talk to a brother who goes to other states, and it's like, yeah, we think this is normal. And it, like Wes said, it's not that anyone's ever wrong. It's simply, that's what's right for you and your grand jurisdiction, and that's the correct answer. So you can't ever say, well, you're putting your coat on the outside, your apron on the outside of your coat. That's wrong. No, it's right for you. It's not for me to say it's right or wrong, but it's fascinating to see the difference and to be aware of that. And kind of, there are certain things unique to Masonry everywhere, and there are certain things that just change dramatically. And that's what's cool. For us as research type, we need to seek out those differences and kind of figure, it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. You elect the master and the treasurer and no one else, and the master appoints everybody else every year. Or we elect 7 and appoint 5 more every year. It's just, we all do it differently. Everyone elects the master, but beyond that, it seems to change dramatically within jurisdictions.
So by the way, to answer your question, I'd rather have the lodge of 300 or so than only 20 or 30 show up, because that tells me that I could have 300. I've just got to find out what it is that makes them click and want to show up. So
Right.
it's an opportunity to change or
Right.
challenge. It's a challenge to go figure out what does it take to get all 300.
That's kind of where we are. But I guess it was more like if you got to choose, this is how it is. And everyone either did or didn't. And then I think most people are interested in, I'd rather be 30 of us. But you think about it, if 30 of us are there all the time, our dues are going to be more than double or triple because we have to maintain the lodge. The one advantage of having hundreds of members and only 10% show up, which is the given, no matter what happens, up, down, 50,000, 20,000 Masons in the state, whatever, 10% of your members show up. That really doesn't change that much. If you're getting 20% of your active membership, you're doing really, really well. But the idea is all those guys who are staying home, they're sending in money, and that keeps your lodge afloat. And they're off somewhere being a good Mason in their own way, but there's something to be said for, I'll take your money and you're supporting my lodge. But I'd rather have everyone there. Yes. But I can't imagine going to a lodge where there's 100 people at every meeting. I don't know. We're not used to it. I've been to a few Scottish Rite meetings, a Grand Master's visit, really, but that's all the whole district or whatever. But I don't know. Anyway, I wanted to say our next Unstated. If you are watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We appreciate it. Our next meeting will be May 22nd and at 10 a.m. And Brother Dimitar Mandujev from Bulgaria will be our guest speaker. And I think he'll be speaking about the Grand Lodge of Bulgaria. Last time he gave sort of a Bulgaria Grand Lodge 101, which was really cool. So I asked him to maybe go into depth. He hasn't given me a specific details, but it'll be something about Bulgarian Masonry. So that should be cool. And I wanted to say thank you, Wes, very much for your talk. And great conversation. Appreciate everybody for chipping in with discussions. March 15th, we will be visiting Blue Ridge Lodge of Research out in the western part of the state. March 29th, these are all Saturdays, we will be visiting A. Douglas Smith Lodge, Winchester Hiram. They will be meeting in Winchester Hiram for their meeting. So we decided to make that our official visit up there. That's on March 29th, which is the same day, I think, as the Scottish Rite workshop. So Michael Joyner might be at the one in Richmond, I don't know. But in fact, Wes will probably go to that. I don't know if we can prevail on it. If we're represented at both, I don't care. But I know that's the Scottish Rite Workshop. But those are two things in March. I'm going to try and visit more this year, encourage brothers to get out and visit our other 5 research lodges in the state, now that we have 6 of us, and support them. So that's what we got going on. I'll try and mention that as we go longer through the year. Expect to have 1 Zoom meeting every month. I got 2 in a couple of months, so we have 12 total over the year. I think it's like 2 in September, 2 in November, none in October, none in December, I think is what I have, is my plan. But we're only gonna have like 1 a month basically this year. I had too many last year. It was too much to keep track of, honestly, and not a big attendance, so hopefully more. Anyway, anybody got anything, final thoughts before we break? Michael, go ahead.
I want to say, if you think about it, and one of the things that I think is a great nod to the subject today, decorum and civility, is that in our closing benediction in Virginia, which is not in every state, it does say that we are to remind a brother of his error and admonishment in the most friendly manner. And it's a shame that so many people don't, tap another brother, remind him, of his mistakes in a friendly manner at all. I think, and yet we're admonished to do that.
It's almost like we were told the rules. We just don't manage to follow them.
Yeah.
Huh. Surprise, surprise. All right. Thank you, everyone. And Joe and Michael Fan, I appreciate you all looking exactly like I get lost in which one is which. I swear, it's like I couldn't have planned this better. And then Wes is still in a gray sweatshirt. Michael and I are in the plaid. Michael Jordan and I are doing the red plaid, so we're mostly in uniform.
Oh, Canada.
So, yes. One day I'll go back and look at all our Zoom meetings and analyze my my dress for all of them and have some sort of statistics on that. I don't know.
Yeah, there's probably some personality study we can do
Absolutely.
based on attire. Although it looks like you and Michael got the plaid memo.
Yeah, I know. We were pretty much the same. I just try to make a point of not wearing the same shirt. I always wear a collared shirt. It's usually a polo, or in the wintertime a long sleeve. But I try to not wear the same shirt 2 meetings in a row, and I've done it a couple of times now. I'm like, damn, I try so hard.
only because I had a few minutes to be able to change out and get into the sweatshirt.
Absolutely.
You would have caught me in my colonials.
TMI.
We did Washington's birthday and the laying of the wreaths with AW22 and the National Sojourners. I'm a hero of 76.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, Michael Johnstone then.
pardon?
Michael Johnstone? He's very active in the heroes. He's active in National Sojourners down here. He does the flag talk. He's done it at Scottish Rite conferences. Yeah. Okay.
So we had a Grandmaster with us this morning.
Oh, cool.
25 degrees at Mount Vernon at 8:00 in the morning.
Wow.
But it was a very nice event, and it got over in time to get home and catch this.
That's great.
I'm going to try to get up to AW22. They're having stated at 3:30, so I'm going to be leaving here in about 45 minutes or so from Richmond.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Joe, for joining us for the first time. Thank you, Wes, for your presentation. Everybody for attending today. Good to see you all. Y'all take care. I'll see you all soon.